everybody. This is Profiler Pat Brown, and I'm still laughing because we've had an interesting pre-show to this, trying to make things work, and I've had such wonderful folks here helping me try to figure out how we can use WhatsApp to be able to contact. And so now I'm just so silly. Oh, Lord. So anyway, something made me laugh because I couldn't speak properly, and I called myself a profiler instead of a profiler. And you see, I'm in no better shape than I was when I.
Are you good? What's wrong with starting again if need be? It can happen.
I'll just start 3 or 4 times over. No, okay. No, oh, gosh, it's got the giggles. So I did this show once. I was going to tell this story after I screwed up the last time I tried to start this show over. And I was on MSNBC, and I believe Alex was the host. And so I'm doing 2 parts. She gets to the end of the first part, and she says, well, thank you very much, Crap Brown. She clearly was trying to say criminal profiler, and she just screwed up. She said, thank you very much, Crap Brown. And I'm like, well, no problem. Thanks, Alex. And I'm like killing it. Then I'm like, now I'm starting to go, I'm biting my tongue and I'm punching myself in the face and pinching my legs because I'm laughing so hard. And I know we're going to come back and do a second part. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to get through this. They're going to come back to me and say, so now we're back with Crap Brown. And I was a wreck. So anyway, you can actually see that. I think I have it. I don't know if I transferred it over to this channel, but I actually put that clip up because it was so funny. So some of my haters came in and said, "Well, she got that one right."
Oh, nice people. Oh.
But so when you're on live TV and you can't control yourself, it's used to be it was a blooper and you ended up on YouTube, but now you're already on YouTube screwing up, so nobody has to transfer it over. But I do love the if you go on YouTube and you put in best news bloopers laughter. I mean, if you're in a depressed mood and you just want to bring yourself up, you watch one of the laughing ones, and people lose it completely, and they cannot get it back, and they can't control themselves, and you just end up sitting there laughing hysterically with them. I mean, you can't breathe. And I think they're the funniest things. Whenever I'm in a really bad mood, I'm like, oh, let's see if there's another compilation of people falling apart on the news shows, laughing themselves to death. So they're really fun. So, okay, so that was a really fun start to the show. So anyway, this is the second call-in show, and I'm trying to work out some problems with people calling in from outside the United States. I'm doing an early show today so that people from Europe and apparently 8 o'clock in New Zealand they have calls too. So, but we have a problem with how do you call when you're from outside of the country, and it's going to cost you a fortune. So we found out you can do WhatsApp, but nobody could kind of make it work. So we're trying to learn how to make it work. So we actually had a pre-show where we were messing around with that. So now this is going to be the actual show. So anyway, hi, Molly.
Hi, Pat.
Who's been very patient and was the first one to figure out at least sort of how to get in here and do this, even though you do live in the U.S. But you said you got in through WhatsApp, and I'm hoping it's true. But if anybody here wants to join the call-ins when when I'm less goofy, you'll be able to call in. You can look below, click on Patreon and join Patreon and join the call-ins. And if you're in the U.S., you just use your cell phone. But if you're outside, the best way would be through WhatsApp as soon as we figure out how to make it work. But this is a new thing. This is only number 2. And hopefully we'll get it figured out. So anyway, so Molly's here. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're brave enough to call in. And I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked Lisa the last time. Lisa was my one and only guest on the first round, and she was very brave and had great things to say. What got you interested in crime or profiling? What was the first thing that made you interested?
Well, Lisa did say that I think she said it was her mother that looked at True Detective. This is interesting. Maybe a lot of those magazines were sold back then because my parents would buy those. So I would see those. And they were like kind of like mystery stories to me
Right.
as a kid. But then I think I mentioned before when I first became a patron that I was really enjoyed Sherlock Holmes stories
Yes.
as a kid, just loved them. And then those old black and white movies,
Oh, wow.
they were so fun to watch. I just love that too. So I think in general, I like a mystery, and then I think I like to see things solved or try to figure it out
Oh,
myself.
very
I like
good.
that.
Well, we
Yeah.
have a lot in common because that was the Sherlock Holmes was my thing. My mother
Yes.
did not have True Detective. She had good
Yeah.
house. She had good housekeeping and McCall's. So,
Yep. Yep. Same here. Yep.
yeah, that it was the days when you got these magazines, and it was so cool to get the magazines, to sit down with them
Yep.
and read through them, and nobody has a magazine anymore, hardly ever. But
I know.
yeah, my mother wasn't into true crime stuff, so that didn't
Yep.
happen. But I did go into the Sherlock Holmes. When I found Sherlock Holmes, I was fascinated by the puzzle. And a lot of people
Right.
think that I'm fascinated by serial killers because that's an expertise of mine, but I'm like, not really. I mean, to me, I'm not interested in how creepy they are and all the horrible things they're doing. I'm kind of like, once I figured that out, I don't really need to hear it over and over again. I mean, it's, you know, and my opinion is a little bit like pornography. There's only so many things you can do in a porn show. It's like
It's true.
if you're going to be degrading and all that kind of stuff, it's just what you do, over and over
Yep.
and over again. So I mean, some people do get a kick out of hearing about all the grimy details. It's just not me. I mean, I don't care. I know it happens, and of course, I look at crime scene photos and can see it happens. But my question is, how do we catch them? And
Right.
that's what Sherlock Holmes was always about, which I thought
Right.
that was the very cool part of Sherlock Holmes.
Yep.
But I actually have a 100-year-old, over 100, maybe it's 150. I forgot when it came out. When did he come out? I have one of the original books.
Oh,
That
that's neat.
Yeah, that I bought when I was a teenager, actually, and
Yep.
I don't know how I found it, but it's wonderful. It has like a look in the front of the cover, and it's like, whoa, that is old. One of
Yeah,
my
that
few
would be.
treasures. But did you have a particular Sherlock Holmes story that you liked the best, if you can remember back to reading it?
Oh, yeah. These, of course, it's still intriguing to me today. But back as a kid, I think the one that really hit home with me was The Hound of the Baskervilles.
Oh,
Ooh,
Hound of the
what
Baskervilles.
what a good one.
That one. And it was a great movie. Who was it? Was it Basil Rathbone or something in the
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He and that Nigel Bruce, they were a pair. They were great.
Oh, that was very creepy, and it also made me want to go there to go to the moors and see that hound.
I know the Moors. I don't know. There is a pull there, uh, and not that we want to be locked in the sorrow
Well,
of
probably
of the
not, but
gloomy moors, but it would be a neat place to see. That's for sure.
it was a great atmosphere. That was what set it up, and you could just
It was.
feel
Yeah.
the darkness and the coldness and the emptiness. You
Yep.
could actually feel that. It was, he really wrote very, very well, which I always appreciate a good writer as well as the
Yeah.
story. He just captivated me, and I can still read them today and find them just as interesting. And some people aren't aware, but Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is really the father of deductive criminal profiling. He actually
Yes.
is. Yes, he is.
Yep.
He started a whole society. It was like the first Innocence Project, trying to get people who he thought were wrongly convicted out based on evidence. And because he had this interest, he had wrote these stories, but he really did know his stuff, and he believed
Yes.
in following the evidence to then do your analysis and then to prove someone's guilt or innocence. And so that is deductive criminal profiling, which
Hmm.
is what I believe in very strongly.
Yes.
And it's not what the FBI does. And they do
Yes.
inductive criminal profiling, which is doing a lot of research and which is interesting. There's nothing wrong with it. They did lots of interviews and research, and then they came up with statistical stuff. And then when
Yes.
they did their profiling, they a lot of times leaned on statistics rather than the evidence in front of them. And that always bugged the heck out of me because it's although you can put that in your head and use it to to look at stuff, you cannot say that's true if you don't see the evidence to support that. So if you're going to
Yeah.
say, for example, a male committed this crime, because statistically men commit more crimes, you know,
Yep.
why this time do you say a man committed this crime? Why? Well, you know, if the woman was raped and there's semen there, probably pretty good, unless, you know, a woman did something weird and then dumped a condom on top of the woman. You know, and that can
Right.
happen. So, you know, there are anomalies, and you can't, you know, when you're doing profiling or any kind of analysis, you can't go with the weird anomaly. You have to go with, you know, because you're trying to find more evidence. You're trying to get the right investigative avenue. So you don't want to say, well, you know, it could have been a Martian, so let's waste all our time going that way. You know, 99%
Right.
chance of it's not a Martian, you go this way, you know. So
Right.
99% chance it's a guy, you go this way. You can always keep something in the back of your head. And I'll tell you a story, a very funny story about where it turned out not to be a guy. There was a woman who was I think she was 7 to 9 months pregnant, something very pregnant. She was found, I believe, naked or mostly naked, strangled with a telephone cord in her bedroom. And of course, they're looking for a serial killer. And it turned out to be her boyfriend's wife.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
he wasn't too happy about the pregnancy, I guess. And so, yeah, so she had gotten in there and she had strangled to death with a telephone cord. And, you know, I don't know why she was mostly naked. Maybe just it was bedtime, you know, and she was whatever,
Yeah.
came out of a shower. The funny part about that story is the woman who did the murder, when she was in court, said, well, I didn't do it. It was this drug dealer who was in there who killed her. And they asked her what he was doing before the killing, and she said he was eating cheesecake. And they're like, he was eating cheesecake? Where did he get the cheesecake from? And she goes, oh, from his pocket. What are you even saying? It's the stupidest case you ever heard. But it was a woman who did something that looked like it probably would be a male. And so you
Right.
have to be
It would.
careful of that. But you don't want to go by statistics, and a lot of the FBI profiling has been statistical, and I've never been fond of that. So I'm the deductive side, which is if you're going to say something, at least give me something to support it. You know, if
Right.
you're going to say whatever, what's your evidence to support that? If you're going to give an age, why are you giving an age? Just because guys between 20 and 30 commit more crimes than guys between 70 and 80, you know?
Right.
Yeah, but not always. It could have been a 50-year-old. You know, why would you
Yeah.
say between 20 and 30 if you don't know? Now, if he did something that was very youthful, you know, let's say he stole the car and he was playing certain kind of music, and you're like, yeah, it's probably, a young guy who would know this kind of music. You know what I'm saying? So
Yes.
you could say in your profile, it is likely that this person is fairly young, below the age of 30, because the music that was turned on in the car, let's say the person's car that was stolen only listened to country music, and then the car is stolen and it's gangster rap.
Yep.
You might be able to say, it seems like a fairly young person. And then you could start, now you can go into racial stuff. You can say, well, it's probably a black person because more blacks like gangster rap. But that's not true. A lot of whites like gangster rap. So I would be
Right.
careful about that. I'm like, no, that's not really true. So, as a matter of fact, I've listened to some. So, it could be a 66-year-old lady who committed that crime. White lady.
You're kind
So,
of extrapolating out with nothing really to
yeah,
support.
yeah, and then the most important thing is to explain why you have this conclusion, because that
Yeah.
way it gives the detectives or whoever else is looking at the report a way to understand how you came to that conclusion, and they can either say that makes sense or what was she smoking, you know, rather than if I just put out a list of things. It's a white guy between the ages of 20 and 30 who lives with his mother, has a dog, has a big knife collection, and probably drives an old car, never completed high school.
Yep.
Where did you get that crap from? Did you make it up? If
Right.
you can't explain those things, I don't know what it's doing in a profile. I don't. And this is the old style that was developed by the FBI, where they started, profiling personalities, and we're going to profile the serial killer by saying these things about him. And I'm like, yeah, I have no idea if those things are true. It's just, I have never understood it, and I've been against it for a long time. So I love Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He's a
Yes.
logical, practical man basing things on evidence, and I learned that from Sherlock Holmes. So I just want,
Yes.
oh, I have to see what, this was a funny, Gretchen says, my mom watches Cops. It's her favorite show.
It's
Is that,
good.
yeah, Cops, Cops really gives people an idea of how it is to be on the streets. And I've done a lot of ride-alongs uh, in my life. And quite fun and exciting, and I knew that I should never be a police officer. I enjoyed them, but I'm not that gutsy, really. I'm better off as a profiler, and unlike the movies, it's a pretty safe job. I sit at a desk and I study stuff. I mean, it's, no serial killers are chasing me down, and I don't have to, drive up to a crime scene and, a robbery in progress and jump out with my weapon and try to stop things and arrest people and, I'll do all that scary stuff. So I'm a chicken. So,
Yeah, me too.
so you started out with Sherlock Holmes, and then
Yep.
later on, is there anything else that came to you that over the time that just made you more interested in as you got older?
Oh, I would say, I retired a couple years ago. I work full time, so I didn't have, I had, different things that were what I loved to do when I was not working, so forth. But, and I didn't focus a lot during those years on anything like, oh, just for a general term, true crime. I
Right.
would kind of, would pique my interest to see a headline in the paper or hear something on the news, and I might look at it a little bit more. But uh, probably, oh, I don't know. I think really it was COVID, being shut up and everything, and then that coincided with about when I retired. Then I had more time to spend,
Oh, didn't
and
we all have a
yes,
lot of time in our little
yes,
selves?
and I think the first thing that I became aware of, which I'd never heard of, it was the Golden State Killer. I had never heard of him,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and
Apparently, the
uh,
police didn't really actually hear of him for years either. They couldn't catch him, It's like,
but I began to hear a little bit about him and read about him before any of the news came out that they were kind of onto him, and then it came out, not too long after that that they caught him. So that was probably when I started getting back
ah,
into being interested in the process of figuring out who done it.
who done it? Yeah, it's interesting when you look over the years. Even though True Detective was there, and there were mystery stories, there certainly were different, series like Agatha Christie and all that.
Yeah.
And there were definitely news reports, but we weren't inundated, and that probably was a much healthier thing than today. We weren't
You
inundated
know,
because we didn't have the internet and 24-hour cable, and
yeah,
so
it
you
happened.
got a little here, a little there. You sat in your, maybe at the beach reading a book, but
Yep.
now everywhere, just
Yep.
everywhere. So
It has to be a healthy balance, that's for sure.
I think it's gotten out of hand, and that's my opinion because between like Oxygen Channel used to be, I mean, Oprah was always like, let's do positive things, and now she's like, let's do crime. I make more money. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, that's how they will
and
see it. Yep.
Discovery Channel used to be all history and science. Massive amount of crime now because people find crime sells, and then all these television shows have gone there. The television news shows have gone there, and I think it's kind of like a little overwhelming. So
Yes.
and
Yep.
I find too much of it is speculative in the sense that we're just going to talk on ooh 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 ooh, ooh as opposed to let's discuss the actual the evidence and the investigation and things like that. So
Yes.
yeah, which is what I fight to try to do that. What's it say? Wait a minute. Uh, Dartmoor is creepy. Is there some haunting legend attached to it? Dartmoor, yeah. Oh, look at this. I used to live right next to gloomy Dartmoor in that story. My parents dragged me there for walks every weekend, even in the depth of dark winters. Did you see the hound? That's what I want to know. Did you see
I
the hound?
I know. So it's such a spooky one.
That's what's, oh, what? The hairy hands of Dartmoor.
Ooh.
Yes. As teenagers, we used to drive around in the dark, scaring each other with hairy hand stories. Oh, that's really cool. That's really neat. We have in Bowie, Maryland, where I live, we have the Goat Man.
Ooh.
Apparently, there's a half goat, half man thing running around here, and that's actually a famous story in our area, which I didn't know until I moved here. And I'm like, oh, good, there's a goat thing here. It's funny what they make up. But we
Yep.
had this dilapidated mental hospital, which just is still sitting there. It's like this brick thing that just, overgrown. And for some reason, they've never done anything with it. I mean, for like 2, 3 decades now, it just sits there. I don't know why, but I think teenagers like sneak into it because it's creepy.
Ooh.
And I think that's goat likes that spot too. The goat man, not the goat. What was this? In reality, we were more at risk from escaped prisoners from the prison in the middle of Dartmoor. But that wasn't as fun as a hairy hand. That's true about escaping prisoners because I went down to a place called Palestine, Texas. And one day I may do a show on this case. So I flew to Palestine, not Palestine, Palestine, but it's spelled the same way. And I flew in, I got my rental car, and as I was driving into Palestine, there was a sign on the side of the road that says, "Warning, hitchhikers may be escaping prisoners." I'm like,
Thanks.
oh, great town. And then when I got there, I found out there were like 3 industries in town. You were either the prison industry, the mental hospital industry, or the police industry. It's like, those are the
Goodness.
3 things. It's like, great place. And you ended up either working for one of them or living in one of them. So, I mean, it was like a really strange place. But I did, and apparently, basically, you went there and had Texas fried steak, because that was the thing to have in Texas. And it was, it was like 700,000 calories on your plate and all full of gravy on top of the chicken fried steak, and then the mashed potatoes, and then the biscuits, and then the gravy that covered everything, So it was like, wow, I may be in that hospital. Maybe there's a fourth one there, hospital.
Hospital for all the bad
I'll be
endings
there.
from the other
Yeah,
3.
yeah. So, but that was it was an interesting place to work, and a very, very sad crime of I believe the child was 13 years old who was murdered. But it was definitely an interesting town, and I remember there's a horrible joke which says, you're a redneck if your porch collapses and it kills 7 of your dogs. And I was sitting on the porch and I heard these dogs howling underneath it. I went,
It's
alrighty
true.
then. I was like, yeah, okay. No, sorry, Palestine, I love you guys. I just remember these little things, because every place has a little cultural things that are just fascinating. Of course, it's only a tiny representation of the area. I mean, we in Bowie have, I'm sure we've got ours too. And somebody comes into Bowie for one day and goes, well, let me tell you about my experiences in that town. It's like, well, you shouldn't have hung out there, Should have gone someplace else. So how did you find out about my show? Out of curiosity.
Oh, yep. Well, as I said, after I retired, I have more time then to while away. I love to read, and
Oh,
I like to read news, newspapers or news on the internet, whatnot.
all right.
And I think I just came across one of your shows
Was it YouTube
on
shows?
YouTube.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. So,
and became aware that way.
oh, interesting. Because, some people know me from back in my television days, because I started in television in 2000, it's after 9/11. I remember Chandra Levy was one of the first cases, and then the DC Snipers were
Yeah.
some of the first cases I talked about. And some people ask me, how I got on television to begin with, and because some people, who are concerned about my background, that didn't come from the FBI, that I was a self-taught criminal profiler, and opened up my own business. And it's like, how did you end up on TV? Did they not vet you properly? And I'm like, well, actually, that's true. They didn't vet me at all. It's absolutely true. So there's stuff about, I'm going to write, I have a book I'm going to write. I'm not going to give you the fun name of it, but I'm going to include a lot of the stuff that I've learned, television and stuff over the years. But yeah, the answer is no, they don't vet properly on television, and they just want somebody in the seat, And so what happened was I had my website, and I suddenly get this call from, I don't remember which one it was. Maybe it was MSNBC, Connie Chung, maybe. I'm not sure which person it was at the time. And they said, "Hi, are you Pat Brown?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Can you do our show in an hour?" And I'm like, "What?" And they said, "Well, our guest couldn't show up. So something happened to the guest that was planned. And they were in a panic. And it was in D.C. And they found out I was right on the border of D.C. and Maryland. And I said, "Well, I could." And they said, "Well, we can't get a car to you, so can you just grab a taxi where we'll pay you back?" I'm like, "Okay." So I've never been on TV. So taxi pulls up, I get in the taxi, I get to wherever it was, MSNBC. And that when I got to the part where I jumped out, right, they were actually at the front door of the building with their hand out, like a relay, like this. And they grab me and they pull me in the building and they yell at the guard, "Let her through." So I pass through security without stopping because they're pulling me through. Throw me on the elevator. They run me upstairs. They say, "Sorry, we don't have any time for hair and makeup." It's like, goody, They threw me in the chair, mic'd me up, and put my earpiece on. And then they said, "That's it," because that's all the time we had. And they don't know who I am. You know what I mean? They got me off the internet. I mean, I could have been, completely whatever. And all of a sudden I'm on the show and they go, "Oh, and we're here with criminal profiler Pat Brown." And I said, "Well, hello, Connie." And then she asked me questions. I answered, and she said, "Well, thank you, Pat." And I said, "Well, thank you, Connie." And I got off, and there was a message for me on my phone. It said, "You rock, you rock." It was from the producer, because they didn't know who I was, and they were throwing me on TV, and I could have sucked so bad, and they would have been like really embarrassed, right? And that does happen, So once I did that show, my phone just started ringing, and that started my television career. And did they ever vet me? No, they didn't. They didn't care. They never looked at my background, who I was. I never told them I was FBI or anything. I never said that. I'm an independent criminal profiler, and I state that. Occasionally, they screw up and put, retired FBI profiler. I'm like, and then people would accuse me of lying, and I'm like, I didn't tell them that. They just don't do their jobs. And so,
Well, when I saw you on YouTube on one of your shows, I realized then I had seen you before.
Oh, really?
On TV.
But
Yes,
I looked a
had
lot
seen you.
younger.
Well, you look the same. The same. It was
This
all
is
good.
a sign for lying.
You look good. No, you looked fine.
Well,
It was, it's, thank you for doing that, because it's been a gift to be able to listen to you.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you. It's this wasn't my idea. I had a friend who had another show, and she said, "Why don't you do YouTube?" And I went, "Huh? Huh?" Well, it was during coronavirus too, so she was like, I was like, she was very nice. She took all of my stuff off my old show. I had never done a YouTube show, but I had put up all my news clips. And I had like a couple thousand followers there, and I couldn't get into it because Google took over YouTube, and my password never worked again, so I got screwed.
Oh,
So yeah,
yeah.
I was really thrilled about losing 2,000 subscribers, but anyway, I'm like, well, it's done is done, And so she moved all those old clips over for me, which was sweet as all get out, and
Yep.
then I started doing the show, and
Yeah.
I never really thought about doing a YouTube show, and it's turned out to be really, really interesting, because when I do shows for the networks, I'd get my little sound bite, and a lot of times I was never able to explain things properly, and it drove me nuts, because I wanted to explain, but they're like, so I'd say something like, "Well, it could be a serial killer." "Well, thank you, Pat." I just said could. Can I finish the sentence? And they don't care. They're like, "Okay, we're done." And it was always frustrating. And even when I do documentaries, like I'm going to be flying down to Tennessee. I am doing a documentary coming up next week on a particular
Oh.
serial killer,
Oh.
but I'm going to be edited to death. I don't know what's going to show up, and I might be just, he's a serial killer. You Where when I do these shows, I say what I want to say, and and I explain as much as I want to explain, even if it is way too long for some people. Like one person said, Pat, you ought to break up your shows into 4 parts, like part 1, part 2, part 3, because it's too much to get through one of your shows. And I'm like, you do know you can just stop it and come back later.
True.
And you can watch another piece. I do that all the time. I can't get, I'm busy and I saw 5 minutes of that. I just stop it and I come back to my library and I pull up what I was looking at and I go, and I go on and watch the next part of it. I mean, okay. So, but, some people aren't interested in detailed explanation or understanding things. They just want to hear the story. They want that in 15 minutes and be done. But, it's not me. And, I get to do what I like here, and that's really cool. And I control the show, and I find that fantastic. And so it's a whole new world to be able to do that. But I don't get hair and makeup, so. So the first time I did the show, I'm like, what do I do? My hair color's not taken anymore, and I suck at makeup, and I can't do hair. What do? I said, screw it. I'm just gonna do the show.
I'll tell you, the show is fine for me, and it's great. It's so humorous at times. It's great. Well, it is, and it's so informative. I've learned a lot, and after the first show, I'm like, well, I'm going to be watching this.
Well,
So
that is cool. I mean, that's my hope, is that it's worth something to somebody, and
right.
I don't want to be worth something just for total entertainment. I want to be worth something for educational purposes, because then because I've had people say, why don't you do this? I'm like, I don't feel comfortable doing those things because I don't want to just be, telling a story. Like, I know the mystery and makeup things are very popular. Tell a great story, have candles and do makeup and have 1 million subscribers. But, first of all, I can't do makeup. But also, that's not what I want to do. I'm not a storyteller. I'm an analyst. So, yeah. But is there a case that you have been wishing was analyzed more than you've seen? Like, you've seen it other places, but you keep wishing it was a little bit more, somebody would.
Yeah, well, I had mentioned once on one of your shows about the Oakland County child killers, and that was from Michigan.
County child. Oh,
and
is that wait a minute, is that the island?
Yes, yeah, Fox Island, yeah.
Right. Yeah, Fox Island. Okay,
Yep.
wait a minute. I did something on that.
Yep. If you did somehow, I don't know how I missed it, which is possible.
Wait a minute. Let me think.
I mean, I can miss the obvious, and then I can get on WhatsApp, so I cannot explain these things. But.
Wait a minute. First of all, I have no memory, so people ask me, "Oh, have you done this?" I'm like,
I think you looked it up a little bit and talked about it. And
no,
I
think I connected it to. Okay, the question was it connected to? Tell me what I was connected. The other case that was supposedly connected to.
Oh, let me think here.
Okay, come on, Molly.
Getting a blank here too.
I'm gonna have to Google pretty soon.
Fox Island was connected to the Oakland County child killers or killings. It was 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls.
What?
And the 2 girls, the 2 girls were not sexually assaulted. The 2 boys were.
No, but there was a guy. There was some guy that was. The theory was he committed these crimes, and then also they thought maybe he was rolling around Fox Island.
Yeah, his first name's Ted, and his last name is Lamborghini.
What? That's not the one.
He's in prison for life.
Oh God, that's going to drive me nuts. I know I talked about this, and the thing I came up with was very vaguely. What show was that? It was about a guy who definitely was a killer. Oh, God bless it. Where did I?
Yeah, and they theorized John Wayne Gacy, but that didn't pan out.
No, the Fox Island thing, I thought was highly.
The guy that owned Fox Island was a native Michigan guy, very rich.
Right.
And he flew away when he found out he was, in big
Right.
trouble, and went to the Netherlands, and they never got him out of
Yeah,
there.
yeah, and I
Yeah,
did talk about it because I said
yeah.
whoever was supposed to be connected with that, and I just can't remember now. Ah, that's annoying. Crap. Anyway, but the Fox Island thing, I think what I found about it was I found it was highly, highly exaggerated. I'm not saying that bad things didn't happen there to the boys, because these
Yes.
boys were being lured over there, like, because they were like, oh, look, you're going to get to come to the island, do all these fun things, like a Boy Scout kind of thingy,
Yeah. Yeah.
and some of those guys were pervs, and but there was this theory that all these kids were being like tortured and filmed and all this kind of stuff, and I think that
Yeah, that
was,
became very vague. It never.
yeah.
I. I don't know what to say about all of it,
I think
honestly.
it was
I know
highly,
whatever you.
highly exaggerated, because what you have is when you've got a person who has the ability to have some control, has a whole lot of money to have that control, what they will often do is they will provide something that's relatively good in general, but then they will find their marks in that whole group. Now, I can tell you a story about this, as a matter of fact. And this is a real story from oh, wow, this hurts. Ah, sorry. Ah, this starts pressing in your head. I'm like, but anyway, so, oh, if I didn't need this for reading, I wouldn't wear 'em. But so this is a story from my children's baseball team. So our town had a baseball team for boys, right? My boys, they were called the Brown Brothers, and they were the same age, and I will tell you they were 6 weeks apart in age, so that always confuses the hell out of people. One was born in June and one was born in July. Can you figure it
I
out, Molly?
understand. Yes, I know why.
I want to hear it. Why?
Well, I believe one of your sons is adopted.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
So a lot of people think, I'm like, no, I hold my breath. I had the first one, and it was hurt too much. And some people think it was a stepchild. No, I had one of my sons. I had my daughter. 2 years later, I had my son. And then
Yeah.
I was unable, I had a tubal pregnancy and was unable to get pregnant again. And I wasn't planning to have any more kids, but somebody said, hey, you want to check out this, out of the blue. When my son was 5 years old, somebody said, what, are you interested in adopting? I'm like, so I met this other boy, and it happened to be, he was the same age. So I ended up with two boys the same age, but 6 weeks apart. So
Yeah.
my adopted son is my baby. I never got to have him when he was a baby, but he's my baby. So anyway, and he's now a 38-year-old baby. So anyway, but but they were the Brown brothers, and they played real great ball, especially my son who I'd adopted. I'm not going to give his name here just so I can not mess up their lives. But he could pitch like you wouldn't believe. Anyway, he was
Awesome.
scouted by the pros, and he decided he did not want to be a pro baseball player. I was like, oh, so good.
Yeah.
But you got to do what you want to do. So anyway, he has a happy
Right.
life. So anyway, the boys, when they were, I would say about 8, 9 years old, somewhere in that range, right? They were playing on the town team, and there was this coach. And I would, I came to every practice, sat on the benches, one of those baseball mommies. My husband was there too, watching when he was available, and I'm watching this guy, and something about this guy bothered me. And I'm like, he's a pedophile. Like, I said that to the woman sitting there. That dude's a pedophile. Now, this, mind you, this is before I did profiling. So I guess I was destined to be a profiler. But I'm like, that dude's a pedophile. And the people next to me were like, let me think. Wait a minute. Wait, was it before as a profiler or after? Let me think. Hold on a second. I gotta do some math here. Okay, he was born in 1983. Okay, I was just at the edge of. Okay, I was now studying profiling and doing all my research. So I was 2 years into profiling. Okay, so I'm sitting there. There's a pedophile, and the woman's next to me. What's your problem? I was like, something about that guy. He's way too interested in the little boys on the team. He
Uh-huh.
likes the slight boys. He's not married. He's a young man. He likes the slight build boys. My two boys were tougher boys. He didn't like them at all. He didn't mess with them. So, but he was always like behind those little slight boys. And I'm like, that just bugs the heck out of it. So anyway, there was a trip. So they were going to have a big, huge baseball, tournament up in Albany, New York. And so he was going to drive his van with the children to Albany, New York, stay overnight. I looked up, and my kids are like, "Oh, I want to go to the tournament." I said, "You're not getting in that man's van. We will drive you to New York. We will get a separate hotel room, and you're staying with us. You're not getting anywhere near that guy. I don't trust him."
Yep.
And so we went. They played the tournament. We came back, and they went on. So then the season finished. Do you know, the next fall, my son came running in. One of my sons came running in with the newspaper when we used to have newspapers. Ran out of the newspaper and says, "Guess what, Ma? They arrested him."
Oh.
Turned out
Yep.
he was a Catholic school teacher and had brought some of his students back to his house and showed them porn. Elementary school kids.
God.
And molested them. He's in jail now. And I'm like, told you that guy was a pedophile.
Yeah.
But this is the way a lot of those guys work. So it's not like everybody, it's not like, so he ingratiates himself into a group of young boys. Or it could be Boy Scouts, it could be baseball, it could be, this island, where you bring all the children, give them an opportunity. And it's not like every child is assaulted and molested and tortured and all that kind of stuff that they're trying to say. It's that you find the ones that are susceptible to your little maneuvers, and you work with them, and then they become something then those are the ones that become your victims. But it's not like people think it is. Like, it's like every kid who showed up there was like sexually assaulted and videoed. It's not like that. And there was no evidence of that. So, it became one of these, like a satanic panic type things, which I don't think it was. I just think you had some creepy stuff happening. I'm not denying that. And the guy who was running it, he ran for a reason, because he's a pedophile. But, that's different than there's this huge, massive group of, this is what people always like to think, there's 50 guys all participating in this whole thing, and it's this big, huge, shady underground. It's like, probably not, Those are either very rare or almost non-existent. So, let me see, just so I check here. Was that the case where the killer might have thought the girls were boys? Yes.
Yes, you talked about that.
What
yes.
is this? Yeah. Who was it? What did I talk? What was this? What case was this? It's driving me crazy.
Well, you and now, as far as the main case that you talked about the day that I brought up, this Michigan case.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but the message that you sent out, you said, do you know of any? I'm paraphrasing. Do you know of any instances where a ruse was used to abduct kids? And I mentioned then, or answered back that, regarding this case, there could have been a connection to the 4 kids who were murdered.
Right.
Because it was all happening kind of at the same time in the same location, and kind of all these people were suspected of murdering the kids. Not proven, but were suspected of also going to that island.
Right.
And it was 2 boys and 2 girls who were abducted right off the street.
Right. I don't think they're connected. I don't see any validity behind that. I think it's one of those things that, the same thing we have these days with the internet in general. It's like, oh my God. People start, like, I have to, like on my particular YouTube page, I wipe out a lot of messages. I'm like, look.
Yep.
Don't start saying things like, I think that Dr. whatever his name is molesting children. I'm like, don't put that on my page. You have no evidence of that, and you're ruining some guy's life. Don't do that. I mean, that's unnecessary. Even like for, even cases where there's some good information, it's like, unless you have the evidence linked to something legal, I don't want to put it up there. So there was nothing that I saw. I think this is just a lot of fabrication and a lot of connecting dots that weren't dots, I think they're 2 entirely separate things. I think you had a serial killer, and I think you have a creepy dude on an island.
Right. And these poor kids who were murdered, it was never solved, but there were people in the area who were pedophiles who
Lots
were
of those.
convicted, yeah, who were convicted of assaulting a lot of other kids.
Right,
Not they didn't were not convicted of killing any other kids, but they
right.
were convicted of the assaults. And the one owned a car, and there is linkage in one of his cars back to one of the victims,
Right.
the child victims. But it was never
Wow.
enough to charge anybody, not even
That's
close, I
really
don't think.
that's really frustrating. But
Yes,
one of the interesting things about the pedophile issue is we have this issue with the Delphi case right now. That I just did a video on the because I came out with the interrogation of what's his face Keegan Klein,
yes,
which was 2 years ago, and they're like, oh my God, this proves it proves things. And I'm like, no, it doesn't actually prove anything. So basically, Keegan Klein, he's been arrested, and I can say this because it's true. He's been arrested for catfishing and sexual stuff on the internet with underage girls.
yeah,
That's a fact. Creepy dude. I call them creepy dudes. So anyway, he's a creepy dude. Now it turns out his dad is kind of creepy too, and I'm not going to get
yeah,
into all the things on dad because some of that's just I it may have validity, but I don't know that it does.
yep,
But he was in the home with creepy dude Junior, so you know, and
yes,
the question is, did he become also a suspect because of his own very creepy behavior? And I believe there is documented evidence of him making phone calls to a young woman, and she did not know who he was, and it was sexual phone calls to her. So,
yeah,
creepy dude number two. So, so you've got a stalker creepy dude, which is, in my opinion, if you call somebody up for sexual stuff and they're not in on it, they're not saying, "Oh yeah, let's do this," that's a sexual assault. Even if you're not
yep,
touching them, it's a sexual assault. So
yeah,
you are a sexual predator. So
yep,
that particular information puts the father, Tony Klein, as a sexual predator, and Junior Keegan is also a sexual predator. Now,
yep,
they both had contact. I mean, not the sorry. There was a contact with the Anthony that catfishing site
yep,
with the girls, and there's a little confusion over there. How much, who was contacting, who was there, and who did it. Blah blah blah. But here's the problem. They they were 11 days after the crime of the two Libby and Abby being murdered in Delphi. They were in that house.
yep,
They investigated, and it's been now 5 years. Nothing's happened. So either there's no DNA from the site to link to these two guys, or they're not the guys. It's the two choices. And are they good suspects? Yeah. I mean, really good suspects? Yes. But the problem is, if you ever do one of these, how many pedophiles are in my neighborhood type of thing, how many sexual, it lights up like a Christmas tree around your house. You're like,
yes,
wow,
yep,
that many creepy dudes? The answer is yes. So the problem is, just because this creepy dude looks like he should have done it doesn't mean this creepy dude didn't do it. And
that's correct.
therein lies the problem. And
Yep,
you wouldn't think there's so many creepy dudes, but my God, I had one case where a woman was murdered in her home. Her husband became a suspect. But do you know there were two serial killers living like on either
oh my
like a quarter of a mile this way and a quarter of a mile this way? These two serial killers.
wow,
I'm like,
yeah,
but it turned out, in my opinion, neither the husband nor the two serial killers. So there you go. So
so there were three around.
there was no. The husband I think was totally innocent, and I think the serial killers suspects were totally innocent. I think the other guy, who actually I was in his home, when he tried to lock me into it, was very creepy moment of my life. It was probably the scariest moment I ever had as a profiler, because
That would be scary. Ugh.
yeah, because normally I say profilers aren't chased by serial killers, but I was investigating, and he was the next door neighbor, and I asked if I could talk to him about what had happened, what he saw, and he invited me into the house, and we were alone in the house, and then he started going around the house locking the doors until we got into the garage. And then he told me he saw the car next door, the truck go out of the garage. He looked through the window and he saw the husband in him. And I looked at the windows and they were so dirty you couldn't see anything through them.
Uh-huh.
So I knew he was lying. And I'm like, oh, I'm now been locked. I saw him locking everything down. Now I'm in his garage. Everything's locked down. We're alone. And what I did was I had my phone and I pretended I had called the office. And I turned around and I said, oh yeah, I'm over here with Mr. Smith. I'll be, we're just finishing up our interview. I'm at his house and I'll be home I'll be leaving in like a few minutes. And when I said that, he got pissed and he just walked his door and get out. Creepy.
Scary.
Yeah, I still think he is the killer. Was never proven. That was a poor investigation, let's say that. And the case has never been solved. But, the guy did try to trap me in his garage. I don't think
your radar was right about the baseball coach.
Yeah, but it's like sometimes, yeah. But there are a lot of those guys out there, there really are. And so it's very hard when you're doing, when you're analyzing cases to understand that there can be many suspects. And sometimes even when I've talked about certain suspects, I'm not saying necessarily that this guy has to have done it. And some people mistake that. I just did a thing on BTK. I'm going to do a second run-up on BTK, Dennis Rader and BTK. And my point was, is he the original BTK? And there's reasons to believe he may not be. And I had a suspect who was an original suspect who could be. Now, there's some more information that's come out. I'm going to do a whole second thing on that. But just because you have a good suspect doesn't mean he's the guy. You see what I'm saying? And there are sometimes 2 or 3 suspects, and it turns out to be, well, you got to find out where the evidence actually in the long run connects. So all detectives, all good detectives will be willing to look at different suspects, even if they think this guy is the top suspect. Doesn't mean he's the only suspect, and doesn't mean it couldn't be somebody else. So you have to keep an open mind. And until you have the evidence, you can't put somebody away. And so you just have to stick with that. Let me see what Gretchen said here. Let's see. Was that the case? Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, I put that up before. Yes. Yeah, just to say this again. Was that the case where the killer might have thought the girls were boys, being that they dressed for winter and snuck up behind them? Explains why the girls were not sexually assaulted. That's my theory on that, yes. Because, you really can't tell from behind what you're looking at. And if, little girls look like little boys if they're dressed all in snowsuits and stuff like that, especially if they're riding bicycles. There's a tendency for people to think they're boys, just because.
It's true.
It's true. Yeah. In reality, more boys ride bicycles than girls, right? If you look at a group of kids running around the neighborhood, you'll see many more boys than girls. Let me tell you, I got a funny story for you. Okay. So I got to tell you a funny story. I just read this. I thought it was great. How do you solve crimes, right? So there's this, so this boy said when he was 12, this man said when he was 12 years old, right? He came home from school and his parents were very upset. And he's like, what's going on? And they said, well, somebody broke into the house and they robbed us and they stole your dad's coins. He had some expensive coins and he stole your dad's coins. He's like, oh man, so we've called the police, right? So meanwhile, the kid goes into his bedroom, and he finds this pair of jeans on the floor, like his scuzzy, dirty, crappy looking jeans on the floor. He's like, well, that's really weird. And he opens up his closet door and he finds that his nice tan corduroy pants are missing. So by that time the police have arrived and he goes, I'm going to go find this guy. And so he jumps on his bicycle, because that's what I thought of it, bicycle, right? And he starts bicycling around the neighborhood. He gets around the block and he looks over and he goes, oh, look, there's Scotty in my pants. so he just goes back home and goes, it's Scotty. That's who broke into the house. I've solved the crime.
Very good.
I thought that was brilliant. I'm like, oh, that is so cool. 12-year-old kid, he's solved the crime, and the police are like, we just got here.
I like it.
But
never take someone's favorite corduroy pants. It's a big mistake.
Exactly. Because then he noticed it was missing. And he said, I think he said bell bottoms. And then he apologized for the fact, yes, that's what we wore then. But yeah, it's when we talk about stupid criminals. Sometimes they do stupid stuff. And I actually did a show. I'm going to put this show up. separately, but I do a little radio show on for Joe Salzone on Tuesdays, and I pointed out he was asking me, what's an easy crime to solve, and I said, well, as a profiler, I mean, I solved this crime in seconds. I mean, I was so brilliant. I said, so it's a 1996 crime in Italy, and this bank was robbed, by this masked man, and he came in as a holdup, and got the money, and they left, and I said, as a profiler, I'm going to say this was an inside job perpetrated by two men. One between the ages of 20 and 30, and the other one between the ages of 40 and 60. How did I know that? How brilliant am I to know that? Do you know how?
No.
They had a videotape, and the robber went up to the window and said, "This is a holdup. Give me the money, Dad."
Wow.
What an idiot. It's on video. Give me the money, Dad.
This is too good.
That's great, isn't it? I mean,
Yes.
I thought that was so funny. I'm like, oh my God, that's just hysterical. See how easy it is to profile? But stupid people make for easy catching. But
Yes,
unfortunately, sometimes they get lucky, or they're just not as stupid as we wish they were. So that's just unfortunate. So I see no one else has figured out how to call in. So, so that's why you got to be my one and only guest today.
Well,
But you've been wonderful.
Well, thank you. Lisa S.H. was great 2 weeks ago, and I enjoyed
And now
that.
I've got Molly. So it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
If the one of us can make it through.
There we go. So we have to figure out how this works. I have to figure out how the call-in works as far as, I like the concept of the WhatsApp being a way to call in, if we could just figure out how it works. Because that way I don't have to go to the other version, which is the software version, which is just so complicated. And I can't figure out how it works. I just, it's not that I'm stupid, I don't think. But they have, people,
It is too complicated. It is.
Well, the thing is, people who develop a lot of these programs and are involved in a lot of these programs, it's like, it's the old thing where when you get the instruction book for something you bought and it's written by an engineer, and you're like, yeah, I'm
Yes.
not an engineer. I don't understand what the hell you're talking about.
Right.
It's like that, and it's like you have to sift through. I mean, thank God for Google and YouTube, because you don't know how many times I've had to go to both of these locations and put in every word I can think of to try to get a videotape on what I've done or what's gone wrong or why it's not working. Used it for my vacuum cleaner, as a matter of fact. Good rate. YouTube with a whole demonstration on how to work the stupid vacuum cleaner I bought. But it's so frustrating because they don't often cover everything, and they don't do it in a very logical way. And this is, by the way, when I do this BTK second part, I got a fella who wrote to me, and I'm not going to give his name yet because he hasn't given me permission yet, but I'm hoping to bring him on because he came up with some information which I did not know. But, in giving me that information, I have been researching back on all the books people have written and all the information I had on that case. And I'm like, is there anyone who can just tell the truth, and just state it clearly? Why is there all this, smoke and mirrors and confusion and things that don't make sense? I mean, I don't understand it. So if you got this object, like I bought this thing for the show, right? This physical object.
Yes.
It's got 8 little buttons on it and lots of lights that come up and things you can go like this. And then things you have to plug in on 500 sides, even though it has 4. And I'm like, so I get the little book. I'm like, okay, that tells me absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I go online. I'm like, how do I work this thing? You recommended it. How do I work it? I went on YouTube and they're like, this thing's great. I'm like, okay, thank you. Can you tell me how it works? There was no information anywhere. I could not find it. And that's why my son came out and he about lost his mind, And so he was like working on it. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to stand here in the room with you. I'm going to leave now. Because I knew he was getting frustrated. I could see him turning colors, I'm going to hide in the other room. Would you like a beer? I'll go away. And then I come out an hour later and go, how's it going? Go away, Mom. Okay. So that's how difficult it is. And it's just so frustrating.
I would say a lot of the manuals are they're incomplete,
You
and
think?
they are wrong. The words are, says to do this and you do that and it doesn't work. And
Yeah.
it turns out later you should not have done that step. It is really frustrating.
It
And
is.
that's
Legos
just
are
on a
good.
little simple
Yeah.
thing that you buy for yourself. The technical writing has gone into a black hole. It's awful.
It is. It's extraordinary. It's just an extraordinary, frustrating thing because you think you're going to buy this object, which this one cost me like $300. I buy a
Yeah.
$300 object. You think it could come with instructions to tell how it works, and it turned
Yeah.
out not only did I buy the thing, but it didn't tell me it didn't come with all the pieces that go with the thing.
Yeah, that too.
So
Yep.
then I bought the microphone. I had to go down the street to get that because that didn't work. And then I had to buy these. I got more of these things. Now I got a bunch of extra stuff, because it's all wrong. Because there's the male end. That's a female end. I've learned about female ends and male ends now. Yeah, that's a female end. I don't know what the hell that's called. But anyway, this is crazy. Let me look at what Lisa has to say here. So the author Beatty was not actually talking about the first guy you said was BTK and not Rader. No, no. Beatty didn't actually have my my suspect was not in that book. What he was talking about was the general way the case went. But the things that he said he knew when he worked on this case, and he talked to the police all the time, so he had a lot of good information. And then you have John Douglas, who has the first book and the second book, which do not match, by the way. And for a guy who worked with the police, why does he not know stuff? Especially when he wrote the second book, because he should have known everything, but he doesn't. It's just confusing as heck. My information comes from a detective who worked on who was one of the original detectives on the case. I came in 2004, and I've talked to all these people who knew this guy. I talked to the detective. So my suspect was one of the major suspects at that time. And I'll get into all the issues of what's so weird about this case. Not that my suspect is the guy, and that Dennis Rader isn't, but that there's things that don't make sense, and either it's that Dennis Rader isn't BTK original, or people just don't know how to communicate. It could be one or the other, but there's a lot of squirrely stuff, and it doesn't make sense, and it's driving me nuts. And so this fellow who called me, it didn't call me, he wrote me this email, and he's like, he's like really cautious. He's like, well, I'm not trying to insult you, Pat, like you're wrong, and he was very, very polite in bringing up his information and what he had come up with. And I'm like, hey, that is really interesting because I never saw that. And so I'm really fascinated with what he's come up with and how it all plays in. So I'm kind of hoping he'll come on a show and we'll do BTK 2 and talk about the issue of information. Because he came up with something I hadn't seen. And I'm like, why didn't I see this? And I looked for it, and I didn't see it, and I asked the main players about it and didn't get the information. So something's weird, and I don't know what it is. But that he came up with it is interesting. I don't have an issue with that. He's a very nice person. So I'm hoping he'll come on and we can just discuss, make a separate little call-in show with just him as a guest, and we'll talk about BTK and Dennis Rader and these weird issues, which I just can't explain. And it may just be the worst communications in the world, or a bunch of stuff that I can't explain it. So I'm going to get a whole timeline together with everybody's information, and then I'll present it because it's very complicated. But it's interesting because this is what confuses people. It confuses the public. It confuses people who've worked on the case. It confuses families, and it confuses profilers who are like, I worked on this case. That's just not true. And maybe you have the right guy, but why have you lied to me? Why are you telling me stuff that isn't true? Don't know. Good question.
Well, Pat, regarding BTK, I enjoyed that show very much, and was interested to learn a little bit more after watching that show. And so I did find Dennis Rader's statements when he went to court and stood up and admitted discussed each murder.
Right.
And I noticed he discussed the was it the Otero family?
Otero case, correct.
Yeah, and that did seem a kind of rehearsed to me. It seemed kind of like a confession.
Yes, yes.
And I just sitting here thinking, the man that you speak of sometimes, and I've not looked up any of his work, but his first name is Peter, and he does statement
Oh, Peter
analysis.
Hyatt. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yes.
Peter Hyatt.
Right.
I am wondering if he's ever done a statement analysis on Dennis Rader's statements.
I do not believe so. And, you know, it's really tricky. This is where everybody gets these. Oh, this is a really good point you make. Uh, when you write books, when you do YouTube shows, when you do statement analysis, there are certain issues that people veer away from because basically they don't want to screw themselves over.
Sure. Yeah.
Because you can get a lot of flack from
Right.
being open and honest about things. What people, because what's happening is in the public eye, they're seeing only what the media is telling them. So,
Right.
and it's like just give you a really quick example of what I'm going to talk about when I do BTK 2. There's a whole issue on DNA, and I'm going to get into that later. A whole issue on the DNA stuff. And by the way, when you're talking about the Otero case, one thing that bugged me about Rader, he kept saying, I think and I guess, which you kind of
Right.
wonder why
I
he's
know.
saying that. But anyway, he just could
Right.
not be remembering well because it's long ago. That's possible. But there's a lot of information that came out about that case that he had access to and can have been fed as well. So it's hard to tell. But here's the thing. There's a whole bunch of issues about the DNA. Now, I'm going to get into that because the DNA stuff was actually not very well explained to the public, and I never even heard about it. So there's now some information about the DNA being tested with Otero, right?
Ooh.
So yes, yeah. This is going to be a really interesting show because I don't want to get into all here. But here's the thing: my suspect was cleared by Landwehr, he's the main guy now. He became the one who took over the case and is the big hero, Landwehr. And personally, didn't do a lot for me. We asked him directly, have you been able to exclude this suspect? He said it was cleared twice. We said, how? Because my suspect was not at work the day that this went down. He worked at Coleman's with the Oteros and Bright. He was there, but he wasn't there that day. Now, of all the people, you would know whether, because he was, when they were investigated, you would know whether he was or wasn't there, right? You would.
Right.
By the time Rader came along, and so many years later, you can't really prove Rader's alibi. It's impossible. He could have been.
Yeah.
No, he didn't work at Coleman, by the way, at that time anyway.
Yep.
And he didn't work in that location. So whatever he was doing that day, we don't know where he was because there's no way to prove it going back in time. So Rader's, kind of shit out of luck on proving an alibi. Even if he had one, he couldn't prove it. But
Right.
we don't know. But this guy, my suspect, had no alibi. They knew that. So how do you clear that guy without DNA? It's
Don't see how
impossible.
you do.
You
Yep.
can't do it. So when Landwehr told he had been cleared, it's like we knew that was a lie because there was no DNA testing that proved it could have cleared him at that time. So why are you saying he's cleared? You see, this is the kind of stuff that goes on. And so
Yep.
what happens is most people who work in law enforcement and profiling FBI people, everybody kind of has everybody's back, you know what I'm saying? So nobody
Yes.
wants to admit anything. But I'm
Yep.
an independent, so I'm kind of big-mouthed. And I'm like, I want better communications, even if you're right and I'm wrong. Because I'm not always right. Maybe this Dennis Rader may be the original BTK. I'm not objecting. But why is the information so peculiar? Why was I lied to then? Because I know you could not have cleared my suspect. He may not be the guy, but you couldn't have cleared him at that point in time. Maybe
Right.
a year or two later you could have, but not then. And then there's a whole issue about the DNA, which is just bizarre. And that's where the writings of Robert Beatty, the writings of John Douglas, book 1 and book 2, all come into play. And that's what it's really bizarre. So I'm hoping to bring this guy on just because I like him. He's playing devil's advocate to me and saying, Pat, you might be wrong about this. And I like that because he's made me think. He's made me do more research and, and have to see what's going on. And so we've been going back and forth with emails, and he's been really great. I like him, and I don't know who he is. I don't know who he is. I have no clue. But I like him because he's doing the research. He's respectful, and you can not agree with me as long as you're respectful. Just don't say, Pat,
Right.
you're an ass. Okay.
Right.
Bye. Pat, you're an idiot. Bye. Pat, I'm concerned. I don't understand this. I think I disagree with that. I'm good with that, because
Sure.
that's an intelligent person who, God help me, I hope everybody doesn't agree with me, just because I said something.
Sure.
Please don't be that person. So this guy, I really liked the way he came across. I was very appreciative, and it's actually what he's brought forth has been fascinating to me, even though was shocking in a way. But I'm like, I did not know that. And so I'm going to get into that. So, but I don't want to give all away because I want to make sure I get everything. It's going to be a lot of research. I have to set everything up, and then I'm hoping he'll come on. If he doesn't, I'll do the show anyway. But I thought he'd be fun to do that.
Good.
So,
That sounds great.
yeah, I think that'll be cool. So yes.
Yep.
Since you are going to do another show on BTK, could you recommend any books for me? I love typing. For me to get a heads up. There are 3 books. One is Robert Beatty. That is the main one. I think is very interesting because he wrote that before they arrested Rader. And then he wrote part of that book after they arrested Rader. So you get a kind of a before and after, which is really interesting. Robert Beatty, he was like the guy on the scene at the time. John Douglas has 2 books. Now there's one called Bind, Torture, Kill, BTK, Bind, Torture, Kill. I forgot who it is. I have the book. Was on my table. It's not here. I have it in the last show. I showed those 2 books. Nightmare in Wichita is Robert Beatty, and BTK is written by 4 people, and it's written after Rader is arrested, and it is revisionist history. And what bugs me about it is they took everything about BTK and just stuck Rader's name into it without question. And so it kind of is very manipulative. But there's still very interesting things toward the end of the book, which I'm like, huh? But this is a lot to spend money on. And not, But then there's 2 Douglas books. One is an early Douglas book, which I found on the internet. Thank God, because I won't pay for it. No, I have the original. Obsession is his original. Okay, Obsession is the original. And there's 3 chapters in there on BTK. He doesn't say it's BTK. He does a whole bunch of aliases and stuff. But it is BTK. It's the terrorist. He's just making up names. But he's giving the information that he had at the time. Then when you go on, I found on the internet a free copy of his newer book on BTK. And oddly enough, the information changes. Why is that? So, see, that's what happens. You write a book when you know certain things, and then later on when you learn other things, you hope nobody goes back and look at your first book, So,
Too late.
right, one of the things that changed, which I'm going to bring up, is the DNA issue, is that the only DNA in the Otero crime was semen on Josie's leg. That's a little girl's leg. She was had semen on her leg. That's all we ever heard about. That's what the detectives told me. That's what Beatty said. That's what John Douglas said. Interestingly enough, in his final book, there's a pool of semen now at her feet. I'm like, what? Where'd that come from? So this is all to do about DNA testing. Now there's a pool of semen at her feet, on the ground, on the floor. It never existed before. Where'd it come from? Why does nobody... There was no reason to hide that piece of information. It's not like you're going to get together, how they say they keep information in case you ever interview somebody. So it's not like you're going to say, so Dennis Rader, Where'd your semen end up? I mean, like, I don't know,
Right.
man. I just ended up someplace. You know what I mean? Probably doesn't know. So why would that be a secret? So if you're going to say it's on her leg, why wouldn't you say it's also on the floor? But it never was on the floor until after Rader was convicted. Right when he was being arrested and convicted, suddenly it appeared, and it's a very confusing thing, and this drives me nuts because I don't have an objection to it being Rader. I have an objection to misinformation because I think
Right.
that's unfair to the public. I think it's unfair to detectives of the future because let's say Dennis Rader isn't the original BTK and they're being told he is. Then detectives and profilers then use that information to understand things. And if it's the wrong information, you're understanding the wrong things. That's the part that bothers me. Also that you left a guy out there who's guilty. I mean, Rader's a serial killer. I'm not questioning that. That guy's a serial killer of the nth degree. He needs to be in
Right.
prison. I'm glad you got the guy. He needs to be there. If he's original BTK, no problem. But if he isn't, you've left the real guy out there, the original guy, and he killed 5 people. That's my concern. It's like I want truth. I don't care. It's just not who's right and who's wrong. It's like I want the truth. And why is the truth so elusive? Oh, oops, I just hit my phone. Why is it elusive? Why is it just straight up and straightforward? I don't get it. So that's what I'm going to bring up in the BTK2 that I'm going to do. So, oh, that's an interesting point. It's just true. I also think that Rader's personality and his expressions have a flat effect. They do. He's a psychopath, and it's very matter of fact for Rader to just say, yeah, and I killed her, and then I raped her, and or he didn't actually rape her. He said, I don't. He was more into the after they're dead fun, but they're very very. They explain what they're doing like you explain going fishing. It's it's a hobby, and they view it as a hobby. And though they're excited at the time, they're not explaining it in the way you think a human being should explain it. Like, oh my God, no, it's not like that. It's like, well, killing people is not a big deal. Neither is raping them or torturing them. I mean, it's like kind of okay. It does have a flat effect, and you'll find a lot of serial killers do have that in general. Psychopaths in general have that, so that's a good thing. If you have somebody in your life who's got a flat effect on a lot of things, I want to get away from those people. And so, yeah, yeah, definitely. So this is what I will talk about in the next show, Lisa. It was on Josie, but not on the floor. First book, on Josie. First Detectives, on Josie. As far as I knew, on Josie. First BT's book, on Josie. Douglas, on Josie, just on her leg. All of this, on her leg. All of a sudden, there's a pool of it on the floor. Which I never heard about until after Rader was convicted. And appears in a DNA test, and it appears in Douglas's second book. Well, what happened to the first book? You didn't know the same thing. I mean, you were there. I mean, you were. There's a whole bunch of things. I'm going to have to list it all out because that's the only way it's going to make sense as to how weird this whole thing is and what's actually going on. So you're asserting that only the Oteros were killed by your suspect. I'm not asserting that at all. Do not misread what I say. I'm asserting that the Otero crime and the Catherine Bright crime, 4 Oteros and Catherine Bright, which were the early crimes, might have had one particular killer. And 3 years later, I think it was like 3 years later, then the other killing started. They might have had a second killer. Now, it might have been the same killer for all of them. All 10 that Rader confessed to might be true. But there also might be that might not be true. So there might be one killer for the first 5 and then another killer for the ones that were later on. But I'm not asserting my suspect committed those crimes. I'm asserting that he was a great suspect, and there were so many bizarre things that happened that I'm having trouble understanding the thing about Rader and his connection to the original crimes. That's all. That's it. I have a sexual problem, is what he would say to them. You think? Well, he didn't have a sexual problem with his wife. He was able. People wonder why, a married man could have, would be a serial killer, because he can have normal sex with somebody, but then have these other fantasies. But hey, wait a minute. Just to be fair, that's what porn is all about, because a lot of men and women will like. They'll have certain kinds of sexual pleasures with their significant other, but then they'll be squirreling around on the internet looking at stuff that their significant other will not do with them, because that is enticing to them and is exciting to them, so that they find that sexually, interesting. And Dennis Rader's the same way. He had normal sex with his wife, apparently, but that wasn't all he wanted. He wanted something more unique, shall we say. More unique. So anyway, all right, that's it. I'm going to stop on Dennis Rader because I really want to do a good show on that, and it's so complicated. I got to do my work on that, because I just want you to understand what's the issue with information, and what's the truth and what isn't the truth, and why aren't we getting the truth if the truth is so simple? That's always my question. If the truth was simple, you just tell me the truth. Why are you not telling me the truth? And that's my concern. And if somebody doesn't tell me the truth when it's so simple to tell me the truth, then it makes me suspicious that it isn't the truth. So there you go.
And Pat,
right?
Pat,
yes.
Pat, as you have said in the past, the truth never changes.
That is true.
So there can't be this at this point in time, and then later on, there was this at that same point of time. It doesn't work like that.
That is true. And if it's the truth, why are you hiding it? I don't understand that. If you've got the evidence, throw it in my face. I'm okay with that. It's like, hey, wouldn't you want to show it to me? Why would you not tell me about it? Why would you? So, I don't know. It's a really, really confounding thing. And it's one of those cases that I worked in 2004. Wow, that's a long time. 18 years ago now? Yeah, 18 years ago. And it always stuck in my head as something that bugged me. Not because I needed to be right that this guy was the guy, but that I'm like, why has it worked out this way? Why is nobody telling the truth? Why am I getting 10 different stories on this? So anyway, I hope you'll join me for that show. But Molly, you have been a blessing. It's been great having you here. And if anybody else wants to join in these call-ins, please do come to Patreon and click on it. You can also join Patreon and come to the lives. I have 6 lives a month where the chat room is for Patreons only, because that makes this so pleasant and not have all those crazy people come in.
Yes, it is.
Isn't that great? Yeah. And then I also have the Hangouts once a week, and come to those. And if any of you can figure out this WhatsApp thing, I'm just really looking forward to figuring that out. So before the next time, I'm going to start studying if there's I don't know why I get no messages. I have no messages on the WhatsApp thing. I don't know. I don't get it. So I'm going to try to figure that out, because that would be a great methodology, so that no matter where I am in the world and no matter where anybody else is in the world, we can still have WhatsApp. And because that would be great, because sometimes sometime in the future I may be in another country, and I would also have to use that, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to get anybody to be able to call in, unless I go to the software, which I'm trying not to do. Don't like it. I'll say, see, great show, thank you, Pat and Molly. Yeah, Lisa was my last. So now we have Molly. So. See?
Pat, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for calling in.
It was an honor. Thank you.
It was a great honor having you call in and be so nice to be part of the show today. So fantastic.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you again, Molly. You made it a fun morning listening as I've worked. Isn't that great? And
thank you.
Nobody saw her making the phone call, so she's okay. It's encouraging for shy people like Gretchen and me to hear how comfortable Pat makes callers feel. That's cool.
That's very true. Yeah, I was comfortable.
Gretchen says I'll jump in next week. All right.
Great.
So thank you very much again for calling in. You've been absolutely fantastic, Molly. And it's so cool to hear your voice and find out who you are.
I know, same here. We hear you, we see you, but we're just words on a screen for you. So
Now not so. Now it's
not
changed. You
as
see?
much. Yeah.
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 Okay. Thank you very much, Molly. Bye.
Okay. Thank you.
Molly was absolutely great. So yes, you can get brave and call in, but we'll try to figure out what the problems are. And next week there is no call in next week, which is a good thing because I'll be in Knoxville, Tennessee. I will be doing the television show, so I'm going to be gone Monday and Tuesday, and I'll be back on Wednesday in time for the hangout. So it worked out really well for me. So I got the Sunday show, and then I disappear for 2 days, and then I can do the hangout on Wednesday. But Thursday, guys, is our hangout. It will be at 4 o'clock. It's still our UK oriented 4 o'clock show, so my UK people can be awake. Yeah. So we'll be doing that on what is today? Tuesday, yes. Tomorrow, Wednesday. Yes, I get to take my granddaughter to gymnastics. She's taking up soccer now, which is a good thing because she's not that good at gymnastics. So, but she's much better at soccer. So we're looking forward to her new sports career. So, but I still have to take her tomorrow. So, but so glad you all came here today, and I'm glad I was able to at least get things working. I'm gonna, yeah, it was really fun to be here with you guys. So we'll figure out the WhatsApp thing, and then we'll be in good shape, won't we? We hope. So see you. Hopefully for the hangout on Thursday, and then the show on Sunday. So bye, everybody.